Imagine a 5-year-old boy, trembling in the dead of night, fleeing Paris in disguise as rebels storm the palace gates, swords drawn, shouting for royal blood. This child, wide-eyed with terror, would grow up to become the most powerful monarch in European history. The man who declared, "L'État, c'est moi. I am the state." He would build the most magnificent palace the world had ever seen, tame the wild nobility like circus animals, dance as the god Apollo on stage, wage endless wars that reshaped continents, and rule for an astonishing 72 years, longer than any king before or since in France. He was Louis XIV, the Sun King, whose brilliance illuminated an era of glory, art, and absolute power, but whose shadow would plunge his kingdom into exhaustion and debt, paving the way for revolution. This is no fairy tale of gilded crowns and endless triumphs. This is the raw, riveting, true story of a boy scarred by chaos who forged himself into a living god. A story of ambition, love, betrayal, devotion, and the intoxicating price of absolute rule. Join me on this journey through the grandeur and grit of the age of Louis XIV, a reign that defined France and echoed across the world. Our story opens on September 5, 1638, in the royal chateau of Saint-Germain-en-Laye, where a long-awaited heir is born to King Louis XIV and Queen Anne of Austria. After 23 years of childless marriage, filled with rumors of infidelity, separation, and divine displeasure, the birth of Louis Dieudonné, God-given, is hailed as a miracle. Fireworks light the skies, bells ring across France, and the fragile Bourbon dynasty breathes a sigh of relief. But joy is short-lived. Louis XIII, sickly and melancholic, dies when his son is just 4, leaving the throne to a child king under the regency of his Spanish-born mother, Anne, and her Italian advisor, Cardinal Mazarin. Young Louis's early years are idyllic at first, pampered in palaces, surrounded by toys and tutors. But storm clouds gather. France is torn by the Fronde, a series of civil wars, 1648-1653, where nobles, parliaments, and the people rebel against Mazarin's heavy taxes and centralizing policies. The royal family is forced to flee Paris twice. In one terrifying night in 1651, 12-year-old Louis hides in his bed as a mob of Parisians bursts into the Palais Royal, demanding to see the king to confirm he's not been spirited away. The boy lies motionless, feigning sleep, heart pounding, as rioters peer at him by candlelight. This trauma sears itself into his soul. He vows never again to be weak, never to let nobles or parliaments challenge royal authority. As he later confides, the Fronde taught him that kings are often obliged to do things they hate. Mazarin, a cunning successor to Cardinal Richelieu, crushes the rebellions and grooms young Louis in statecraft. The cardinal dies in 1661, and at age 22, Louis stuns his court by announcing he will rule personally. No prime minister, no regent. The profession of king is grand, noble, and delightful, he declares, but it demands total control. Thus begins the era of absolute monarchy in its purest form. Louis's first act is to arrest and imprison Nicolas Fouquet, the flashy superintendent of finances, whose opulent chateau at Vaux-le-Vicomte outshines the king's own residences. Fouquet's crime? Not corruption alone, but daring to display greater wealth and taste than the monarch. Louis confiscates Vaux, hires its architect Louis Le Vaux, landscape genius André Le Nôtre, and painter Charles Lebrun and sets them to work on something far grander: the transformation of his father's modest hunting lodge at Versailles into the ultimate symbol of royal power. Why Versailles? It's not just vanity. Louis distrusts Paris after the Fronde and wants to remove the nobility from their power bases in the capital. By 1682, he moves the entire court, thousands of nobles, officials, servants, to this swampy site 12 miles southwest. Versailles becomes a gilded cage. Nobles must attend the king daily or risk losing favor, pensions, and influence. Louis invents an elaborate court etiquette, a daily ritual turning his life into theater. The lever, rising, and coucher, bedtime, are public ceremonies where privileged aristocrats hand him his shirt or candle. Missing a moment could ruin a career. As one duke complained, at Versailles, one lives in public. The palace itself is breathtaking. Expanded over decades at enormous cost, draining marshes, importing marble, building aqueducts, it boasts the Hall of Mirrors, 73 meters of gilded reflection symbolizing the king's radiance, vast gardens with fountains dancing to music, and apartments dripping in gold. Louis calls himself the Sun King after portraying Apollo, god of the sun, in court ballets. As a young man, he was an accomplished dancer. Performing in lavish productions, he choreographed himself. Ballet was not frivolity. It was propaganda, showing the king's grace, strength, and divine harmony. Under Louis's personal rule, France flourishes culturally. He patronizes geniuses. Molière writes comedies mocking hypocrisy until church pressure silences some. Racine pens tragic masterpieces. Lully composes operas. The Académie Française standardizes language. Manufactories produce luxury goods like Gobelin's tapestries and Sèvres porcelain. France becomes Europe's arbiter of taste. Fashion, furniture, manners all à la Française. But glory demands war. Louis, advised early by brilliant minister Jean-Baptiste Colbert, who builds navy, economy, colonies, seeks gloire through expansion. The War of Devolution, 1667–1668, Dutch War, 1672–1678, and others bring territorial gains but provoke coalitions. Louis's armies, reformed by Vauban, fortress genius, and Luxembourg, win stunning victories, but costs mount. The revocation of the Edict of Nantes in 1685, ending toleration for Huguenots, drives 200,000 skilled Protestants abroad, weakening the economy while satisfying Louis's growing piety. Personal life intertwines with power. In 1660, Louis marries Spanish Infanta Maria Teresa for alliance, a dutiful but unloved queen who bears 6 children. Only the Dauphin survives infancy. Passion comes elsewhere. Mistresses like Louise de la Vallière, Athénaïs de Montespan, mother of many legitimized bastards, and finally, Madame de Maintenon, a pious governess he secretly marries around 1683 after the Queen's death. Maintenon influences a somber turn, less ballet, more devotion. The later reign darkens. The War of the League of Augsburg, 1688–1697, and catastrophic War of the Spanish Succession, 1701–1714, triggered by Louis accepting the Spanish throne for his grandson, pit France against nearly all Europe. Brilliant foes like Marlborough and Eugene of Savoy inflict defeats at Blenheim, Ramillies, Malplaquet. Famine, taxes, and losses kill millions indirectly. France is exhausted, but Louis's will holds. Tragedy strikes personally. The Dauphin dies in 1711, then his eldest grandson and great-grandson, leaving a 5-year-old heir. Louis, now old and gout-ridden, outlives nearly all family. On September 1st, 1715, after 72 years and 110 days on the throne, Louis XIV dies at Versailles from gangrene, aged 76. His final words to his great-grandson, "I have loved war too much. Do not imitate me in that." The sun sets. Louis XIV's legacy is monumental. He centralized France, tamed nobility, built Versailles, still awe-inspiring, made French culture dominant, expanded territory, though losses came later. But absolute rule bred resentment. Debts fueled the revolution 74 years later. He was a visionary builder, devout convert, loving, in his way, family man, and relentless warrior whose ambition nearly broke his kingdom. From frightened boy to radiant god-king to suffering elder, Louis XIV embodied the grandeur and peril of unchecked power. His era shone brightest in European history. Art, architecture, manners still bearing his mark. If this epic tale of the Sun King, from childhood terror to divine glory, endless wars to intimate devotion, has captivated you, then hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. We're diving deep into more legendary monarchs, forgotten battles, and the dramatic stories that shaped our world. Next up could be Peter the Great, Elizabeth Fronde, or whoever you suggest in the comments. Thank you for joining this journey through the age of absolute splendor. See you in the next radiant chapter of history.